Myphitic Blight haulers are great little vehicles that I think all Death Guard players should definitely take a look at. Now I'm partway through building these ones. I've left the last two components off, and that's because I'm going to show you through what I think is one of the best conversions you can do with this model. Now I've done this video before, back in 2022, I did this exact same conversion. So why am I doing it again? Well, a couple of differences in the video and how I'll actually paint the model, but mainly because this channel is all about what I'm currently doing in my hobby. And I'm putting together a 2,000 point Death Guard army. Obviously I've done that multiple times, but I'm doing a new force and I want a couple of these models in there, so I'm showing you. Now what we're doing here is I've mixed together some milliput and green stuff, two different materials, mix them together, it makes what people call grilliput, which I think takes the best sort of elements of both when you're making these together. I'm pushing this mix into a mould I've made here of the teeth from, I think it was a Chaos Knight, some of the teeth parts that you glue onto the model, and I made some castings of them for a previous video I've done when I did a Nurgle Titan. I took the castings because basically it's a great piece to have, so I've made those castings and then working on the base. So doing the kind of pieces around the build before we move on to the actual the kit bash conversion that we're going to do. Doing the base with green stuff or roller, and what people always ask actually is, you're getting milliput and green stuff all over your hands, you should be wearing gloves, etc. Get it all the time. This is what I use to keep myself safe. Gloves in a bottle. I don't work for them or anything daft like that, but this is what I've used for years. Keeps your hands fairly safe, works for me. It's in the links down below on my Amazon shop in my PPE section, so I always get challenged when my hands get covered in milliput and green stuff. You're not keeping yourself safe. I am. So going through that, just rollering out that base there, and this is so that these models match into my current Death Guard army. If you've watched the channel for a while, you know that when I do armies, I typically do a different basing style for each. My Death Guard, though, have been on this kind of style of bases for a long time. So when the mould has dried completely, this is what we're looking at. So these are some cast up teeth. Now if you've not gotten the blue stuff through the castings and you don't want to make things up, there's a thing later on where I'm going to make some of the smaller teeth for this build just out of cocktail sticks, and you could do that, or you know, pick up some of the pieces elsewhere. So we've got the two Myphitic Blight haulers basically as the final stage of the build, and there's two last pieces to go on. What I'm doing now is separating out those pieces, so taking the track guards away from that kind of faceplate, just clipping them off, and obviously once you've clipped them off, just be cleaning up and be careful to make it sort of as neat and tidy as you can, and then doing the same thing with that kind of weapon section. Now when I'm clipping the weapon section, you can't overly see it from how I film the angle, but the armor plates kind of curve around a kind of demonic piece. So if you just clipper the first part of that armor plate, it will then, you can then easily sort of pry off the weapon. So when you're doing this build, it's like working with the mold lines on the actual kit, and it helps you to separate it. And again, just cleaning it up as you go there, just to give some nice neat edges. I mean, as neat as you need to be when you're making a kind of Nurgle beastie, obviously, because these kind of builds are very forgiving, and that's what I love about Nurgle. If you make a couple of mistakes, you leave it looking a bit raggy, it doesn't matter. Now, putting on some of those parts, so I'm going to glue on the weapons that we've taken off separately, gluing both the weapons on either side, just with some poly cement at this stage. We're not going to start introducing anything else at this moment. So the two weapons, and then gluing on the shrouds that go over the tracks, the track guards, get the word right this time round. So gluing all those four pieces on before moving on to really, this is where the conversion kind of starts. So we've got that armor panel that would be the first piece you'd put on now, clipping off the pins at the back, and then just running a knife along the armour mould lines. So you've got the two arm panels, one that kind of slides under the other, and then just running a knife along to start scoring it along that panel, taking a clippers, and I'm keeping the flat side of the clipper, which is the bit that's obviously which makes it a bit neater, to the bottom armour panel, and just breaking that apart. And again, where we've scored it has helped it to fracture apart. So now that one section is split into two, and this is where we're going to start making the open mouth effect of this kind of screaming demon. So putting poly cement along, and then this time we're tucking it up and under that kind of top metal spiky area. So it's going further back than it was originally. So we're starting to, you know, give the panels kind of more articulation, as we should call it, as this mouth is opening and pushing back along the top ridge of the model. Same thing with that second panel. So the second panel, obviously, that was attached to the first, this is now going to go on top of that first panel we've put on. So again, it just pushes that back further and starts giving you the space to get the open mouth in place when we glue that. So fairly simple at this stage, just glue, nothing anything different. And then with this third panel, you can see I've taken the sort of sockets where the pins would go into, I've taken those off, and you also need to de-pin the rest of the model where the mouth is going to be. But again, glue across there, and again, just pushing it back onto that second panel. So it's basically opening up that mouth for the next stages to work. So again, just poly cement at this stage. When the mouth's open, you can sort of see where it's contacting, so drop a little bit more poly cement into there just to seal it on, and it does set really, really quite solid. So when that's kind of set solid, I've mixed up now some Milliput. Again, you could use green stuff at this stage, or you could use a mix of the Grilliput we've talked about before. But for me at this stage, Milliput's the best thing to use. The advantage of Milliput's cheaper. It does set incredibly solid with no flex, which is why if you're using small pieces like the teeth, you might want a bit of flex in there so it doesn't kind of break. That's not something you got to think about at this stage. So for me, Milliput's absolutely the best thing at this stage for cost and kind of value size. It's also very easy to sculpt. So I'm filling the mouth, not very neatly, just quite roughly filling the mouth area. And then once that's done, I'm making a couple of little sausages and almost forming a gum line around the inside of this mouth. So quite a raised area. It looks quite large at this point, but it will sort of flatten down as we start putting the teeth in. So putting that little sausage in there, smoothing it around, making it sort of blend in and not overlap out the mouth. And this is going to be where we push those teeth that we've cast into this area. Now when we cast the teeth, obviously I did put some little bits of pinning rod into there, so these are going to be what we're going to use to anchor into this gum line. You've got plenty of working time with Milliput, so you've got at least an hour before it starts really losing its workability, depending on the heat in your room or where you're working. This has probably had maybe 20 minutes, so it's still relatively sticky. So as I'm pushing these teeth into this gum line, the stickiness is then holding on to it as well, and when it sets, it'll set solid, just like any kind of like you use super glue. So working on some top teeth and some bottom teeth. And if you've watched the previous video a couple of years ago I did this, you saw I did some really, really big teeth. Just going standard size in this one. Now what I'm doing is clippering off the ends of some cocktail sticks, and these are going to provide these small teeth that are going to go in between the large. And if you've not got the kind of blue stuff, or you've not got the parts to cast up larger teeth, this would be great to use, and you could actually use hundreds and hundreds of smaller little teeth, and it would probably look just as freaky, or even freakier. If you're interested about blue stuff casting, I'll try to remember to drop a video link down below so you can see kind of what it's all about and what I'm talking about. But yeah, just putting in those cocktail stick teeth in between the larger teeth. Now obviously, in reality, this thing would never be able to close its mouth and look at the size of these teeth, but hey, we're not worried about that at this stage. And actually, those smaller cocktail stick teeth might make a little bit more sense if you want a bit of realism. Now, when you've put the teeth in, so you've got a level you're happy with, just using a sculpting tool to go around and literally just push some indentations and striations and things all around those gums, just to kind of, again, one, it'll seal the teeth in a bit more, but it also makes it look like kind of weird, demonic, nurgly flesh, just making it up as I go along when you stab that. So when that's kind of done, I wasn't originally going to put a tongue in. I did the first time round when I did this build and thought, you know what, yes I am. A little sausage of Milliput again, making it into a rough tongue shape, nothing fancy. I did consider doing suckers and pods and all that kind of stuff on it, decided against it. And then when that's made, putting it into the mouth of the beast here, and then using a sculpting tool just at the back, press it down so it seals it on to the kind of Milliput that's already on there. And again, this was all working in the same kind of session. This actual kit bash, the mouth part at least anyway, was one evening and maybe took 2 hours. Obviously, maybe not even that, but the prep time before that, it's obviously a bit longer because I'm doing some casting up and the bases and those kind of things. But if you didn't want to cast the teeth and you were just doing the smaller teeth, then actually this could be a fairly quick kit bash to do, and I think really effective. I have done it before where I did weird tentacles and all those kind of things on it. Didn't want to do that this time round. Now onto the basing. Not going to focus too much on the base, but you've seen me use the green stuff wood roller to make that Grilliput base. There's a Milliput one on the right, as you see there. That was obviously the next session when I did the sculpting of things. And what I'm putting on the base here is just some Milliput balls that I've made whenever I've had any spare. So I just roll a few balls out, and they're great for putting on the bases like this, so it looks like bubbles are going to come out of the weird goo we're going to do later. But you can also use it when you're doing sort of sculpting and things like that for making it Nurgle buboes on the bigger kit bashes. And if you do like Nurgle stuff, and this is the first of my videos you've watched, check out my playlist because there's loads of weird Nurgle conversions on there. Bit onto the basing, so just a bit of PVA glue slapped into some places. What I'm finding, I've had these green stuff wool rollers for quite a few years now, and there's a few bits where some Milliput or green stuff has got stuck to the roller, and there's a couple of patches where maybe the cobbles aren't coming out quite as neat as they were before. So a good easy thing to do there is cover it with something on the base. Either the PVA that we're going to put the basing product I've got on, or just like this. This is a little bit of a cast up of something. I don't even know what this is a cast of, but it's a weird kind of fuse boxy type thing that I thought that'll look quite cool on the base. So we'll do that. Again, slap some PVA around it, and then we're going to use this basing material on it. Now, I didn't film that. The basing material is a weird mix that I've got of kind of sand and all sorts of weird stuff that I've put on there. Here we are, so it's now time for the painting. So I've sprayed it black and I've sprayed it lead belcher, which is my favourite sort of base coat for 40k because it saves you so much time doing the metals, and you'll kind of see that later. I don't really do anything with the base metal areas apart from going over it, just hugely time saving. So now working on Grell and Earth, this is a Games Workshop crackle paint. And when it sets, it's going to give some real nice flaky damaged armour effects, which I didn't do in the first video, I don't think, that I did of these playing verse haulers. I probably need to watch it, so there's going to be a slight difference, but it's something I've done for the last maybe year or two on my models to make really nice kind of Nurgle armour. Now the paint scheme is basically the same as any of the vehicle paint schemes I've done on my channel fairly recently, so this is going to be a little bit of repetition. Feel free to skip to the end for the finished effect if you don't want to sit through what is effectively the same paint scheme I've done quite a few times on my Death Guard. But start off the Retributor armour, that's fairly simple on all the trim areas, then the Death Guard green going onto the armour panels. Now when I'm putting it on, you'll see I'm putting not a lot of paint on. Zoomed in a little bit so you can kind of see those flaky cracked areas on this Grell and Earth. If you put too much paint on at once, you risk filling in those cracks and ruining the point of putting the Grell and Earth on. You'll also see when I put the Grell and Earth on, I didn't put it over the whole panels. I've left some kind of silver areas showing through, and that's going to show just some different tones and effects and some rusty armour, etc. So I'm doing the same when I put the Death Guard green on. I'm not going over those areas that I've left the silver showing, and that's going to give a multi-layered effect to the final armour when we get round to the kind of final painting. Working on some Rakkar flesh onto all the kind of demonic possessed areas around the model, and matching that with the rest of the army. Now, if you're watching this video for the second time, at 11:30 when I originally uploaded this video, all the audio cut out, and for some reason I managed to lose it. I'm clearly not a professional YouTuber. If this is the first time you're watching this video, then I'll try and carry this on, and you won't. You'll be thinking, what is this lunatic on about? But yeah, I uploaded the video. For some reason, the audio hadn't recorded and uploaded to YouTube from 11:30 onwards, so I'm now re-talking through what I said the first time round. But I don't use a script, I ad-lib it, so I can't really remember what I said, but here we go. Working on the base using a bit of cold grey and then into the brown on here, and I'm picking around the areas on the base where those little bits of metallic kind of add-ins are into that basing material that I do use. On the base here, what I'm painting, this is a Chaos symbol that again was cast up using the blue stuff casting. And I'll try and remember to put that link down below. I think I did remember the first time I uploaded the video. And this is the casting of a Chaos symbol. I'm really going into this kind of pool of Nurgle demonicness that we're going to feature on this base in here, and just a little bit of interesting visual detail. I don't go crazy for bases. I'd put enough effort in that I think it makes them worthwhile. Occasionally I push the boat out, but a nice standard base with a little bit of add-on works quite well. Red into the eye socket and into the end of the missiles there, and then onto the Vallejo deep yellow. Now this is going on where this demonic pool of Nurgle's rot is going to be. It provides a nice base layer for the Nurgle's rot, but also then it ties the model together when we put it onto these pustuly bits and horrible stuff kind of in and around the model. So yeah, tying it in similar painting techniques to before. Now I've done nothing with the basic metal at any point during this other than that spray of lead belcher, but I painted over some of the vents here, so a bit of Vallejo gunmetal onto there, and that is the only time you'll see me on this one actually painting with what you would call a standard metal, and that's why that base coat is so time saving and brilliant. Edging the base in black, and that's how I edge all my bases. Some people like to use the top colour onto the edges, but I like a nice black edge. Nice pink tongue. If you've watched the channel a lot before, you'll know sometimes I do some wet blending on here and I'll merge the pinks and things together. In this case, I wanted a consistent colour running through the model. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Slightly different techniques each time you do the model. Now, we're finished with all the base layers and base coats. It's now for the sepia game wash. This is a Vallejo wash, and it's a really, really dirty, mucky kind of wash. And I bounce between this and the Games Workshop Seraphim sepia. Tend to use the Seraphim on maybe Space Marines and those kind of things, but cleaner colour scheme. Use this on the stuff that I know I want dirtying down. I think it's a really, really nice wash, but it really does mucky down the model. You could stop at this point and just go, it's super, super grimdark. I don't tend to, and I think working on these next layers again is what really brings these models to life. So now what I'm doing is the same colours we've already used so far. There'll be some extras coming up later, but the majority of this stage is the same colours we've already used. Couple of advantages on that. One, speed, because you've already kind of got the paints ready and out on your paint table, or in my case, on the wet palette. But also it's cost. So, you're not having to have two different greens, two different bone colours, whatever. And when you're going back over, especially on the armour panels, we're not putting a full layer on. We're putting, it's not quite a wash, but you're trying to get a nice thin layer so that it shows all the kind of greens and browns and all those kind of colours showing through that layer. The other parts are slightly different, so this is more of a highlight colour, but again using the same colours used before, and you can see how vibrant these colours are looking when you put them back over this flesh area. They're not actually that vibrant, and earlier on when I was using them, they didn't look super vibrant, but when you put them on top of that wash, they really do pop. Again, saves time, saves money, and I think it's a lot easier than trying to work out what your highlight colours are going to be and all those kind of things. So yeah, really how I prefer to paint, especially Death Guard, over these last few years. Again, that vibrancy really shows when you use this base colour. So again, this is the same cold grey from before. Really livened up and looking good. So yeah, working your way around those colours. Now you will use some extra colours after this, so moving on to the effect that I use to make the burnt melter. So Druchii Violet, Drakenhof Nightshade and Null Oil. The Druchii Violet goes over 90% up to 100% of the melter area, and that starts the base layer of this 3-part effect to make a nice burnt effect on this melter. Now, because I was painting this morning, so literally Sunday morning, this video initially dropped at about midday, and then obviously I got nicely told by Sweeney Mark, subscriber, thank you very much, that the sound had gone wrong, but this was done very early this morning. Obviously I was kind of rushing for time, so working on those other layers in between, letting this wash dry. I don't let it fully dry before going on to Drakenhof Nightshade, and the Drakenhof Nightshade goes part way down the melter, so not the kind of 90%, maybe 50 to 75% covered, onto the red and doing the red highlights, and then back to the Null Oil, so the very ends of the gun, and this is really the very ends, maybe 25%. So a lessening amount of that wash gets used on the melter, and it will give a really nice burnt effect. Now some contrast, using Plaguebearer Flesh and Majos Purple. Majos Purple onto the kind of gummy areas and the bits that look a bit more like, not vibrant flesh, that's the wrong word, but maybe broken flesh or flesh that's more interior. So in the mouth and also on the broken skin, you'll see it in a minute. Plaguebearer Flesh onto the flat areas, not totally covering it, just using it in patches to just give a few different colours. So we've already got the colours from the base coat, the wash, then the re-highlight, and now putting a couple more on. So it looks to be like, 10, 12 different colours. It's very kind of freaky. And then it's now been varnished. So this has had a Games Workshop Munitorum varnish. Let that fully dry, and then we're going to do the verdigris effect, and this is dirty down verdigris, not putting too much on, just a small amount onto there, and I've got videos on the hobby playlist on the channel if you want to see how that kind of works. And I use this after the varnish because I find when you varnish over the top of it, it changes the colour, and I just don't like how it looks with varnish on top of it. Similar with Nurgle's Rot. If you varnish over the top of Nurgle's Rot, it takes away that shine and that kind of weird Nurgleness that this paint has. So doing that after the varnish, going over all those yellow areas you can see here onto this kind of Nurgle base. But again, I'm not totally covering the yellow, so some of that yellowy brown shows through, and then dropping it into the areas where the armour is cracked and split and damaged. So that's really kind of a finalisation of the model. The other thing I can do, not that I made any mistakes on this one, but if you have made any painting mistakes, cover it with Nurgle's Rot and your problem is solved. So yeah, that's the kind of end of the build. So I'm going to do a spin round of the model here, and I'm looking forward to adding these to the army. My army is nearly done. I've done another 2,000 point block. It's going to go along with our 2,000 points of demons, and I've got a big game coming up start of October with a few mates. So I will do a talk around this army, but I really like how these have turned out. Yeah, so this video, obviously the second time I've uploaded. Thank you to Sweeney Mark for pointing that out. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on another video. Cheers, everyone.